Omensight tasks you, the Harbinger, to relive the final day of a doomed country in an attempt to stop the apocalypse. You learn clues, change fates, and take action against both sides of a war to uncover what led the world to its fateful moment. Released in 2018 by Montreal-based developer Spearhead Games, known for titles such as Tiny Brains and Stories: The Path of Destinies, which may ring a bell for some of you, Omensight is a murder mystery action game. While you may have gotten the impression that Omensight is truly a detective mystery game where the main gameplay is something akin to The Return of the Obra Dinn or Outer Wilds, that's not what this game is. Instead, it's a hack-and-slash game with a detective time loop kind of story. That said, the game never actually says it's a puzzle or detective game. I just assumed from the description. And this isn't a knock against it, it's just something worth noting, because you may have thought the same. Looking at the combat, which is a majority of the gameplay, it's pretty fun, but can be a bit simple. There are some combos, there's dodging, and there's auto-targeting like you'd find in the Arkham or Spider-Man games. You unlock more combat abilities through leveling up from killing enemies during levels, which gives you some cool powers that I'll cover more in depth after a spoiler warning. I'm trying to keep it light in this section so you can pick it up in the first minute if it's interesting. Animations and models are all around solid with some noticeable clipping issues or roughly synced animations from time to time. The models look great, however, and they certainly capture the 2D portraits of the characters pretty well. The Harbinger gets to look fucking sick as the game goes on. The 2D portraits and splash art are also pretty nice. They carry a very storybook fantasy type of style to them, which, makes sense. The music is actually really beautiful, and I'm not much of a game OST guy usually, but man, this game really had the music stand out to me. There's a motif carried between songs, and every time I heard it in another song, I'd go like, oh, I recognize that. The same way you look at a car window on a road trip and go, horses. It's a good soundtrack. All in all, it's a good game, no complaints. Honestly, for some reason, it reminded me of the kind of action games you'd get from the GameCube era. And I mean that in a good way. I haven't played a GameCube era game in a long time though, so maybe that's just my sense of nostalgia. As for the intro to the mystery regarding the game, the story begins with you, the Harbinger, a mysterious entity that awakens only when the world is met with imminent danger, facing off against the forces of Pagaria. During the opening sequence, the world sort of explodes a little bit and everyone dies, and you're whisked away to some pocket realm where a witch explains to you that she has the power to send you back in time to the morning of the final day, before the end of the world. The murder of a being known as the godless priestess, Vera, supposedly is the reason the world fell apart, and it's up to you to discover the truth behind the murder and the events that led to the end of the world. Now I'm going to spoil stuff, and that's going to start with gameplay and combat abilities, so if you think it sounds interesting, pick it up. If not, here we go. I mentioned earlier you can get new abilities and upgrades throughout the course of the game. That includes stuff like fireballs, AoE time slows, instant kills, telekinetic abilities for objects and enemies, another instant kill that kills 3 enemies, and it's really cool, and a super dash, among other upgrades like more damage, more health, damage reduction, etc. The combat is pretty good in this game. I'm not much of a hack and slash guy, but I enjoyed it. And for a game released in 2018 by an indie company, I honestly didn't expect the game to flow so well, even if it's a little rough around the edges sometimes. There are achievements for doing some more ridiculous things with your abilities, and I suspect if someone wanted to pull off some cool stuff, they'd probably have some decent path to accomplish that. I'm not ever going to make a montage for Omensight, but somebody might. The basic combat boils down to a light attack, heavy attack, and a dodge. Press some combination of light and heavy and you've got yourself a combo. Press dodge with proper timing when an enemy has an exclamation mark over their head, and boom, you're dodging. Attack enemies, build up meter for your other abilities like the fireball and instant kill, and that's pretty much combat. Some enemies block attacks with shields. In that case, you need to use your heavy attack. Some enemies are big, strong brutes that don't really care for hit stun, so you'll have to dodge during your combos. Some enemies are just fucking annoying. Anyway, let's just talk about the gameplay loop. The game is essentially broken up into levels. There's only a handful of physical levels you go to, but the game cleverly uses the story as a way of introducing variety into these limited stages. This includes using keys and locked doors to change certain paths, or you'll travel through levels multiple times, but with different allies and at a different time of day, which does change your progression through the story. While yes, you can choose to redo the same level with the same character, I often found if I had missed stuff with one character earlier on, I'd end up back in that scenario later in the game with a different character to be able to do it anyways. I never got bored of going through the same few levels because of the kind of ingenuity of this design. Now, if it's a level-based game, how do we choose our own paths for the mystery? Essentially, you only start the day next to one of the 4 main characters. The game starts you with 2 characters to appear alongside at the beginning of their day, which is Draga and Ludimir. Essentially, as you play through the days of the characters, you'll get things that can later be used to change the course of the day. For example, you can learn how to open seals from different characters, which will allow you to find extra treasure or sometimes change the path you take in that level. Likewise, you'll find Omensights, visions. Omensights are the main way the game splits up its acts. These are visions of the past you can beam into the character's mind and they will know that the vision is true, and this is explained in the game. Avoiding story spoilers here, after unlocking these visions you can't avoid using them on characters from then on. It's a pretty restrictive decision, and honestly the entire game is fairly linear in this way, but all this really does is not let you explore certain times with certain characters. Most likely you'll only miss some dialogue or maybe a hint leading you to the Omensight, which you already have, so it's not terrible. I was a little annoyed personally, but as the game continued I realized it was probably just easier to do this so the player progresses through the acts without getting stuck on earlier clues or levels. Again, it's not really a detective game per se, it's more like a, oh, you got to the end of this day, but this wasn't the right place, we need to find someone who knows about this thing. And then you go, oh, I know who knows about that thing. And you go to them and they kind of say, oh, let's go get that thing, and then the game moves on. The game is also not that punishing for not being able to remember whether you've done certain paths or not. If you've already completed the day with the character and have discovered no new clues since then, the game will explicitly tell you there's no further progression to be made by replaying that day. I'm sure some people would be miffed about it because they don't want to be coddled throughout the mystery, but I found it relatively useful later on when I would do all the wrong routes intentionally to see more of the story. Likewise, if you enter a day without anything new and there is still a point in which you can make a different choice, you can instantly jump to that moment in time and make that choice without having to replay the whole level if you want to. As for the bosses, they range from relatively easy to randomly chunking your health. On the standard difficulty, I only died to a boss once. I never really felt like the bosses were cheap or annoying, though a particular boss does have a shield pop up on every hit that you have to wait for it to dissipate, which is a little annoying. While the fights are pretty simple, I'll take that over stupidly difficult or excessively annoying attack patterns. It's usually a pretty quick fight and they don't typically overstay their welcome. And there's even a secret fight which kind of requires you to be a dick in the story, and I did that. It was a good fight. Finally, there's actually a difficulty setting for the overall mystery itself as well. There's a clue board, which lays out the timeline of events throughout the game, as well as the current clues you've learned throughout the game. However, if you're playing on the intended mystery difficulty, which is like the normal difficulty, you actually can't access this board at all until after you've beaten the game, which was extremely confusing for me, as the first time you finish a level, the clue board is directly shown to you regardless of your difficulty level, and then you just can't find it anymore, and I spent a couple minutes looking for it until I realized this was the case. A bit of an oversight maybe, but you know, since I played without a clue board, I can't tell you whether or not it makes the game that much easier, but even without it, I didn't really have trouble following the story or the clues to reach the end of the game. Getting into the characters briefly, they're all very unique and well characterized in my opinion. All the main characters have a distinct and clear personality. Going over them now, that's Radika, the leader of the Rodentian army. She's kind of an easygoing rat who throws out quips and doesn't really take the situation seriously, with access to Rodentian magic and an instrument that can empower allies including yourself. Ludimir, the bear, who's an ally of Radika, who is drunk most of the time, who has immense strength but isn't always the smartest character. He can be pretty rash and quick to anger, but he still tries to do the right thing. What the right thing is sometimes changes over the course of the game. Draga, a powerful general that leads part of the Bulgarian army. Intelligent, skilled fighter, and a rational individual. She is no warmonger and seeks to resolve the conflict with minimal bloodshed. Indrik, the Emperor of Bulgaria, a cruel and very proud bird. His subjects seem to, however, respect him quite a bit. Still, the tension between Rodentia and Bulgaria have sparked war, and Indrik will not leave defeated. Of course, over the course of the story, things will change and you'll see different sides to these characters. Every time you go back in time to show new evidence or seek out new paths, there may be a noticeable change in the personality of one of them. Likewise, there are these lore tablets scattered throughout the game. Reading these will reveal further pieces of background information about these characters and this world that gives you better insights as to who they are. Honestly though, my favorite part of the game was noticing the somewhat subtle ways some of the characters will change depending on what you've shown them with your Omensight. That includes how they treat you, how they speak to you, how they speak in cutscenes. It's pretty interesting. Finally, the story of the game. I'm not going to cover every extensive detail, but I'll summarize some events throughout the game to give my thoughts. For background context, the story takes place in the world of Auralia, in the midst of a war between the Bulgarians and Rodentians. Bulgaria was a bird tribe chosen by the gods to rule over the land, which went well, until they began recruiting the dog and cat tribes. Other tribes, in this case Rodentia, suffered from the conglomeration of power in Bulgaria. Therefore, the rodent and bear tribes formed an alliance against Bulgaria. The final day is also the final assault on the Rodentian capital, to end the war and have Bulgaria be in complete control of Auralia. Somehow connected to all of this, the godless priestess Vera has been murdered. She was one who is believed to be able to bring peace to both these tribes. vibes. That's the intro to the game, so I'm gonna go a little further now. The day you replay over and over again is the final day. Why is it the final day? As mentioned before, the world ends on this day, and the reason for that is because of an entity known as Vodin being released from his imprisonment. Vodin was sealed away by a previous emperor, Yarbog, within the legendary sword Cladin 300 years ago. While the existence of Vodin and even the sword Cladin itself are questioned, this is a legend that has been told to the people of Auralia. Throughout the game, with mysteries answered, more mysteries will begin to show themselves. Solve one thing and suddenly one character wants to kill another. Overall, this will always lead to you finding the next correct path through the game. The story is actually fairly linear. While there is a mystery to solve, you're almost never going to get stuck asking where you have to go next. You just pick a character, and by the end of that level, you'll get a clue as to where the next step is. It does help keep the story moving and ensures you get to see the many sides of the characters, as you'll eventually have to work with all of them at least once. Do I think the story is perfect? No. Some things aren't explained very well, and there's an early game spoiler for a boss here, such as Radika's transformation into Deathless, which is only actually explained at the end of the game, and that's kind of the entire explanation. However, the overall narrative, the characters, and even the NPCs are all very well done. The voice acting in many parts of the game is also very well done. In particular, I think Indrik and Draga are top-notch talents here. Fun fact, Draga is voiced by Patricia Summerset, who is also known as the voice of Princess Zelda in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Soldiers of Pagaria, our Emperor has placed his faith in us. He believes in our victory. Victory for Pagaria!
To be a bit more specific, I think the characters are well written, but the backstories you can find throughout the game give way more context to their character than just hearing most of them speak. I think some of Radika's actions only make sense with the extra content from her backstory. And there's other characters like Indrik gains a lot from knowing the extra context, but it's not as necessary. The dialogue ranges from during gameplay to pretty funny or just really well written when it comes to the cutscene dialogue. There is this scene in particular that sent me to the moon because of how funny I found the voice acting. Spoilers for late game.
We are square?
Why, as square as can be. It's not like you killed our leader, after all.
Yeah. She wasn't much of a leader anyway. I mean, what's with all the rhyming and music, eh? And the jokes, too. How'd she expect to ever get anything done?
Kill the traitors.
That was really good. As for the story overall, solid. I didn't really get lost following the narrative at all. Everything for the most part made sense in context of the story. The twists, which are of course important for a murder mystery, I did not see coming for the most part. The game ended and I felt accomplished and fulfilled, which I guess sounds a little bit corporate to say, but I wanted to say a bit more than, yeah, I liked it. If you haven't played the game yet and are still watching, I recommend you try it out. Unfortunately, Spearhead Games is somewhat defunct now. They aren't officially shut down, but they had to lay off a majority of their staff back in 2024 due to financial issues. So while there may never be a sequel or renewed ideas from Spearhead Games on this series, the title stands well enough on its own, and I do highly recommend it. Again, the game is available on both GOG and Steam, as well as Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. As far as I know, these are all the definitive edition. Some of the stores don't specify which it is, but they should all be definitive edition of the game, which adds various bug fixes, post-game content, and some quality of life features. And that's all I've got to say for today. Thanks for stopping by.